Good morning, everybody. Buenos dias. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jackie Wong, and I'm the Executive Director of First Five California, also known as the California Children and Families Commission. And today we have the honor, and I'm super excited to actually welcome back our newest commissioner, Commissioner Kris Perry, who has such a wealth of history and knowledge in the early childhood field. Not first, actually. You were in my role at one point, Executive Director of First Five California, just a little while ago, and then also the Deputy Secretary at Health and Human Services and at the First Five Fund, and now with Children and Screens. What a tremendous career you've had fighting for our youngest babies, Californians and nationally. And there's a little bit of a personal story that I've always kind of been a fangirl about, it kind of changing the whole discourse around, same-sex marriage, which is so powerful for so many reasons. And just really grateful for your leadership and kind of trailblazing what this means for communities as we kind of enter into this new era of our current strategic plan, where we center equity and, dare I say, justice, Kris, from that systems perspective, because everyone is always thinking about, okay, what is the evolution of First Five California, considering we've done a tremendous good job in kind of educating people about the dangers of tobacco, which our funding is directly tied to, but really what a tremendous opportunity to think about systems impact work. So wanted to kind of hand it over to you to kind of share with us a little bit about this, again, your experience and like what are you hoping to bring to the commission. I know when you had left, it was because you were an ex officio, and we had said, oh, gosh, I wish you could still come be back. Yet at the time, unfortunately, we didn't have an open position, and now you're here. And so we're just so grateful for your yes and your commitment to our babies.
Thank you, Jackie, and it's such an honor to be here with you today. I am really thrilled to get to talk about all things early childhood, California, and beyond. This has been an incredible journey, and it's been great to go from local to state to national and be back here in California working with you on these important issues at this important moment where we see that the absolute dire situation that families are in based on decisions that are happening in Washington, D.C., and thankfully, we live in a state where leadership, the legislature, the governor's office have tried really, really hard to protect young children and families. And that's been true for decades. In fact, when I joined the First Five movement, I was in my 30s. I've gotten to grow up in this effort that's taken decades to shape. And it is a critical crossroads. And I hope we can talk about not only federal policy and how it's impacting kids in California, but also how the changes to the revenue stream that Proposition 10 depends on has changed over these last several decades.
I've always kind of kept in contact with you because talk to us a little bit about that. As that when even this past week, I was talking with a bunch of folks who are early childhood advocates and some stakeholders and decision makers, and that was their critical question to us, is that at the beginning, about 26 years ago, we were $1 billion in revenue, $1 billion in revenue. And the latest is we're about 270 million, which is in 26 years, which I think we've done a tremendous amount. You, Jane Henderson, Camille, Mabin, and so now me. And so now I'm like, okay. And so then now everyone's kind of looking at this moment in time for us. And we have such a significant brand with kind of the vision. I stand on the shoulders of all of you. Who actually really kind of lifted up the importance of our youngest Californians. So talk to us about, given all your experience and all the roles you played, like what is the opportunity for us in this moment right now?
It's a tough moment because when you have less, you have to be even more strategic and careful and thoughtful and coalition-minded. This is not a moment to be able to solve all these problems on your own. And even when the money was quadruple what it is today, it was still critical to be in coalition with our friends at Education, Health and Human Services across different states that were trying to figure out the best way to deliver high quality early care and education to kids. And it's still that moment, and maybe more so, that you have to link arms with your friends and allies that are working on issues that support young families, but maybe in a different area. So your friends at WIC, your friends at CYBHI, your friends at HHS, your friends at Department of Education, because everybody's under additional pressure around funding. And I want to go back to those days, the early days when the tobacco revenue was at full force and the tax had not yet done its job of reducing and smoking in California, which we're really happy about.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it is a really tough combination to be wanting to stop a behavior that we know is linked to bad outcomes to one that we know is linked to really good outcomes, which is the earlier you invest, the better the outcomes are for kids. I think we should stop for a moment and just talk about whose lives we're really concerned about. And those are the children who might not have access to high quality education or healthcare without the support of First Five, without the support of the state of California or the United States. And so we are at a really critical moment where governance and technology and staffing and partnerships are almost, they're non-negotiables. It has to happen because our kids, the kids in California, are really pawns in a political debate about the future of their future that is taking too long. Like what Prop 10 did with this tobacco tax was so historic and so important, and it's an incredible legacy, but it is not sufficient. So there is a missing piece here where some of what was tested and tried and proven to be effective was not scaled. And so you are sitting here now having launched a number of programs, as have all of your predecessors, that were proven to be effective, but they didn't all scale. What I know you know is we have universal pre-K, but it needs to be implemented more effectively. We know that we've had kids on health insurance programs, but it's being, in a sense, rolled back when it comes to First Five, is that we've been the voice for the youngest children of California since our inception. We still have to be that voice, that there is more urgency than there's ever been. And I was here during, my tenure was during the Great Recession. And a number of programs were at risk at that time, and we had to collaborate with our friends in other parts of the state to make sure kids didn't fall off of these essential programs. And we're there again.
Now the cost of living and affordability, on top of like what it costs then is totally a different kind of price tag than it is now. So how are we going to kind of address that affordability? How do we lift up the voices and center, however the state of California is going to respond to this, on our youngest Californians, their families and communities?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I know you've done in your previous roles is lead at the local level, collaborate with your other friends in the nonprofit sector, collaborate with business, come up with creative solutions for the state to follow on with. And I really think we're at a point now where our local leaders, our friends in the First Five county commissions, our friends in local government, in CBOs that are going to be facing families tomorrow, in food banks, the lines are going to get longer. Diaper banks, the lines are going to get longer. They are facing families literally in real time right now and for weeks to come, hopefully not that long. And as somebody at the state level, I think you're in the position to know when you're facing a crisis and to help the commissioners address that in real time, so that maybe there's room to do something to support our friends at the local level so that their efforts make an even bigger impact. There is just so much unaddressed before a crisis like this that only makes this crisis worse. So as you know, in other words, we hadn't achieved all of our goals. You have a strategic plan that hadn't been fully implemented. You and so many others hadn't gotten to the finish line yet. And now we're sort of taking those 2 steps back, and it's really painful because kids suffer more than adults when they aren't fed, when they can't go to school, when they can't get a vaccine, when they can't go to the doctor. They're at such a sensitive, vulnerable period of development that to deny them, deprive them of these basic services is, in a sense, lowering their trajectory for optimal development in a way that may not be reversible. I mean, these are really, really serious decisions. And I'm so proud that, in California, efforts have been made for years and years and years to create rainy day funds and do things to mitigate the damage. And yet, that too will run out if we don't get ahead of this.
A little bit of PTSD. I'm like, okay, remember when we had to create the rainy day funds, when we had to do all those kind of safety nets for the safety nets, which was in our mind, like, this is the safety net program, yet we're actually creating a safety net for these moments. And to your point, we are back here again. What is, when you think about, yes, our role, how can we as a commission best support the commissioners in kind of being part of this larger conversation? People have thought, like, we're great at broadcasting, we're great at being, kind of convening people, leveraging different opportunities. When you think about, we have, advisory groups, we also meet 4 times a year. We also have, quite frankly, the bully pulpit with such dynamic commissioners. So how do we leverage that so that we become, not just me, but it is really all of us being kind of lifted up in this moment to kind of fight for our kids all across California.
Yeah, be the leader you're being, continue to be the leader you're being, rely on data from the Rapid Survey and other places where they're able to tell you in pretty granular, at a granular level, what the problems are, where they are, and then bring people together that can collectively help solve those problems as quickly as possible. We have a commission meeting in a couple of weeks. It'd be great to have a conversation about what are some of the biggest crises in the state, what are people doing to address them, as informational item, let people tell us how that's going. And if there is a way in which the budget, and I know from having been in your shoes that takes a long time to develop. It takes a long time to get that approved. It's very hard to undo it because it's part of government. Government is intended to stabilize society, not be changed overnight. And so one of the tough challenges is we're going into a crisis. People want to help. We have maybe a little bit of an opportunity to do something that's financial, but what our bigger opportunity is convening, describing, amplifying, and calling to action. Our partners. Hey, what are we going to do about this in real time? And I think the commissioners, because they're from all these different sectors we're talking about, business, government, the nonprofit world, are going to want to step up and help. So it's just it's a conversation about how best to do it.
Yeah, no, I'm so excited, and there's just renewed energy. I've always had great commissioners, but it's just renewed energy of like, okay, I think that I believe that this commission's always risen to the kind of the moment, if you will. We did it during COVID with the diaper, the diaper bank situation, and just kind of really just saying, like, okay, emergency meeting, we have to do X, Y, Z things.
Yep.
And we have a really great EJA team. Like, what is that? Having to be in the know about, like, when is it a crisis? We know that certain things that California will backfill on, and some things they can't, and some things they just have to sue federal government on, which they are on behalf of babies.
Yeah. Because they can't represent themselves. This is why it's so important for people like you and others that lead on children's issues in the state to remember that you're representing those who cannot represent themselves. They don't get to vote. They don't have a voice. They don't get to come to commission meetings. They can't testify. They can't do a video. They can't be interviewed by you, although that would be interesting.
I'm very good. I mean, I got on the ground. We were in a preschool yesterday. Oh my gosh, the babies are just our future, and just, it's so kind of thinking about what's happening in this moment of, like, why are we not valuing the way that we value, they are our best investment, right? We think, you already know this, we say it all the time, 90% of the brain is developed by age 5, 80% by age 3. Right, those 2 million synapses, even in utero, right? So even when a mother is carrying, like, what's the environment look like? Or is she able, are the parents able to get care and healthcare and access or are they afraid what's happening in the world right now? Are they're not leaving their homes, and how do we get, access to them in terms of the well-child visits? We know that they've kind of dipped the numbers of family who are bringing their children to well-child visits. So a lot of good opportunity. And I love that just we're loud and clear. Like, there is a local network that we need to rely on and empower and say, we're with you. Yeah. Right. And so how do we support that? Not just the administrative things, but also on the ground, the things that matter to families and babies. And I love that you lifted up the Stanford Rapid Survey about this. It's in some ways, I think, better than polling. It is because it's only a month old, and we have such a diverse voice of parents across the state about, like, what's happening, what's going on, with you. So in some ways, we are having that interview through data. And how are we? And I think that when I entered, I had not realized the mountains of research, to your point, over the last 2 decades that we have not, we've published, but we haven't marketed. Right, to your point, we know, I was like, oh my gosh, we did this, and so, CARES Plus, I'm like, wait, so why are we not bringing this into the forefront as we're thinking about workforce in the early childhood or education field? And so, kind of that's also like where my head's a little bit at. It's like, okay, so we are armed with the data and good practice, and we have a proven track record. When you think about that, how do we flex that muscle a little bit more? We've done major campaigns, as 30% of the budget is for our media campaign, and I know that you have an interest in that. So talk to us more about like how we might want to evolve or transform like this opportunity.
Well, I mean, I talked about going hyper-local, and before I do that, I want to back up and just say the scaling was always a challenge with Proposition 10 or First 5 funding, because it was a lot, but it was never as much as all the other big departments have.
No.
But I want to point out that both education and healthcare have very large dedicated funding streams that, were they to include younger children more readily, they would do so much to help scale these good ideas. So within the California education system, there's something called Prop 98. That would be a wonderful place for younger children to access public education through those funds. It's sort of happening, but not fully. On the Medicaid side, where we know federal funds come into the state to support parents and families that are lower income, that should be deployed yet even further. So back to hyperlocal. We have First 5 Commission in every county, 58 counties. There are really effective, charismatic leaders at the level, not only our First 5 friends, but their colleagues in county government and local government. It could be really helpful to use your platform, your ability to amplify messages, and segment your audience in such a way that regions, areas of the state that are hardest hit would hear directly from the leaders in that space about where the resources are, how to get help, what to do next. So you start to tailor a more local message from the local leaders who people know and trust at the invitation of the state. So let me make this available to you, San Diego County, Orange County, Ventura County, Placer County, because your community is having its own individual experience of this. How do we make sure the services that are available to you are made known to you? So I would just suggest, remembering, there's a bigger play over there that's about state and federal funds.
Of course.
That's for you to do. That's for you to do. But on the local front, you have your colleagues in local government who might benefit from an opportunity to just get the word out through one really great PSA that you help them put together.
Yeah, the toolkits that as you know, our long-term staff have created have been extremely effective. I want to kind of shift a little bit just to get to know who is Kris Perry for our audience. Talk to us a little bit about your journey, why early childhood, and where you are now. So,
well, let's go way back.
Way back when you were born.
Way back,
where are you rooted? That is a really great. I love a rooted question.
I do.
And I'm actually, I don't know if I've ever heard like the full Kris Perry, like from birth to now.
Well, so I grew up in Kern County, which most people don't know. And it's the southern end of the Central Valley.
Oh, wow.
I grew up there. My parents were both educators.
Okay.
And I had a pretty terrific childhood in the sense that I was surrounded by my parents and their friends who were all teachers, and I went to really well-funded public schools, and I knew by the time high school was ending that I wanted to be a part of the UC system. So I went to UC Santa Cruz. Okay. And then I went on, go Slugs. And then I left there to go to San Francisco State to get a master's in social work. Okay. And so I've spent all my educational years were in public education in California, and I'm so proud of that because those were the golden years. And we won't go on a journey about how things have changed because of revenue again. But I really had the opportunity as somebody who went to social work school in San Francisco to learn about urban social work in the Bay Area, and I became a child abuse investigator in Oakland.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
and I'll come back to that because I feel like I'm back to that.
I feel like we have a lot of similar paths.
Really?
Yeah. Because I was a social worker in Oakland.
Really? In Alameda County? No.
Oakland Public Schools, but Oakland Unified.
And I went to the Oakland Public Schools as a school social worker.
Me too.
So maybe we met. in another time.
Literally, my future's in front of me, Kris. So
It's possible.
I grew up in Central Valley, like similar, like whole Stockton. Yeah, I'm so fascinated. Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to
Well,
interrupt.
you learn a lot in the Central Valley
We do.
about how to get along and how to come together, because in some ways you're spread out, and so you find a way to find alignment and to get stuff done. And I just really learned a lot from watching teachers and my parents and other people make that a meaningful place to live. But this is so the career starts in Alameda County as a social worker, and I did that for 12 years. But I followed along with policy change that was starting to understand better that we wanted to prevent children from being separated from their families. It was so obvious that most of the calls that came in were the direct result of poverty, that families could not overcome the struggle of poverty, and it might impact food or housing or transportation in a way that they couldn't meet their children's basic needs. And the system was not designed to keep them together. It was punitive, and it was harmful, the way that we were moving children out because the parents didn't have resources. It's so obvious that that was not the right thing to do. And we have come so far since then. And I think, again, this administration, this legislature has done so much to help protect children in the child welfare system. And there's still so much more to do. But that's where it all started. And then in 1998, the California voters passed Proposition 10. We now know how long ago that was. And a couple years later.
In the 1900s.
In the 1900s. Here, I'm going to date myself. And then in 2000, after being in local social work for a long time, I thought, I really want to try something different. I picked up a newspaper.
Okay.
And I read the
what
want
are those
ads.
now? Some of our viewers may not know what that is anymore.
There was an actual job announcement for the first 5 San Mateo County executive director job.
Yeah.
And I thought that would be amazing. I ended up getting that. I ended up being there for 5 years in Silicon Valley during the .com burst.
Yeah.
And so lots of traffic. But I ended up from there getting to test again in a county that was highly functional because there was no dominant city. The leaders were very collaborative. There was a community foundation that invested in their success. There were universities that supported their convenings. And so we were able to implement both universal healthcare and universal pre-K in San Mateo County in a short amount of time. And I would come to Sacramento to tell Rob Reiner and the commissioners at that time about that. And they got excited about it. And then when Jane Henderson retired, I ended up coming to Sacramento. And I'll stop there because it's going to take forever to finish this.
No. How? So while you were so I've always actually, through my career, always looked at San Mateo, like, how did you do that? How did you get to universal healthcare, like, single payer, but, all of that. And so during that time, we have a lot of similarities. I had forgotten you were a social worker, and I didn't realize you were in Oakland.
Yep.
I was in West Oakland.
Wow.
So I was at McClymonds during that time. Yeah. Is where, and very similar paths. Had started a nonprofit to address students who were cutting school but being trafficked, quite frankly. Oh. And so, and at that time, they people weren't talking about it, and so, but they were getting pregnant and a number of different things. And so, I think the core of it is poverty.
Well, it was, and those communities are really overlapping because the children that are born to young moms in that time, in that part of the world, again, didn't have the support, didn't have the resources they needed to do everything they needed to do. Yeah. It's still true. I mean, we'll keep coming back to the past is prologue. I mean, we are not necessarily as far along as we should be almost 30 years since we had this dedicated funding stream to early childhood. And it's painful, it's heartbreaking to know that there are still young moms in West Oakland, there are still kids in East Oakland, that are not getting basic services that we know from the research they must have to be successful. And then layer on top of that new threats to their safety online and other ways in which childhood has become even more complicated and challenging than it was 25, 30 years ago.
So there's a little gap. So you mentioned kind of the state of affairs now, where you left us. You left California for a little bit to do big things. Talk to us about where you're at and what you're doing.
Yeah, after spending 7 years at First 5 California as the executive director, I went to run the First 5 Years Fund, which is based in DC, and it's a national nonprofit pooled philanthropic fund that focuses heavily on increasing investments in early care and education by facing the Hill and facing the administration. That happened to be the second Obama term. So
How exciting.
there was incredible momentum at that time, in part because of California's dedication to early childhood, and then other states following along and trying to do similar things. So there was sort of a state level momentum that led to federal momentum. One of Obama's campaign promises in his second term was to do something about early childhood. And he tried, and many of us tried to work with them and get something done. And we did have several big infusions of private investment, and we've had incremental progress at the federal level, whether it's increasing investments in Head Start or CCDBG or MICV and all these programs that support young children. But like California, the public demand, the public will, the political will to do something really big for little kids is still eluding us. It is still not done.
We go to DC often, and I try to figure that out. Like, they say that they believe in this, and yet 150 Head Start sites starting on Saturday, November 1st will close. So what's the thing that moves DC? Most of my life has been in Sacramento. I kind of understand this, but going to DC, trying to kind of figure that out, regardless of who's in. But I think it's generally, I think it's also both sides of the aisle, quite frankly. How do you really convince and create a champion, right? Like, I'm not trying to be political, but it's a bipartisan issue, yet nobody really kind of lifts up and stands up and fights for our youngest.
Right. Well, you just put your finger on one of the major strategies, which is you have to build bipartisan support. No matter what year, no matter who's president, no matter what, it will always be a bipartisan requirement, because both the Senate and the House are almost split 50-50, and that may go on for a long time. So you have a bipartisan challenge that never ends, but you have a leadership vacuum. There really hasn't been a champion in Washington on this issue that stands out above all the others and can really get people to do something that's outside their comfort zone, or where they're using political capital in a way that takes away from another priority they might have. So it's been a really tough spot. You also brought this up earlier, which is little kids don't vote. They can't stand on outside holding a sign. They can't do certain things that people in other movements can do. And so the pressure, this has been at times not adequate. And the last thing I'll say about it is, I think when it comes to women and children and families of color and poor families, they aren't lifted up, they aren't supported, they aren't necessarily amplified in a way that would put them at the same level of importance as leaders or efforts in other places. Like, let's just take climate or reproductive health or LGBTQ issues, where it's mostly adults talking about something they care deeply about and that can sustain a commitment to over many years and throw some of their financial resources at. Little kids in states where we've under-resourced them and they can barely get their basic needs met can't also fight a big, hard political fight. That is beyond most families' capacity. They're just barely able to make ends meet.
There's a lot of they're just trying to kind of figure out what, where my next gig economy is. So I'm trying to kind of feed my kid now, because perhaps, my SNAP is gone tomorrow, right? So
that must
they
be
are
terrifying.
surviving, right now in this moment, like the survivalist mentality. And yet I love First Five, and what we do, we are that voice, right? So, and how do we authentic to the voices on the ground, those babies, those families who, just can't be in a real way, versus sometimes we can get policy wonky, but at the same time, how do we make it real for those maybe both state and federal federal leaders, because again, term limits we have, where I feel like oftentimes we have to re-educate. Even here in California, the importance of it, because it's even as great as we have in terms of what our brand is. I'm not sure if people are fully convinced of the long-term lifespan benefit of it, and so I've been kind of thinking with staff about, there is an absolute economic benefit to investing in our youngest, and yet I don't know if we've made that argument for those who are like the kind of the bipartisan, listen, it's great. It's not just a feel good. We've shared with you the data, the brain science. It's not necessarily moving you in these momentous ways, right? So what do you think about that, and kind of like making a bipartisan argument about like the economic, kind of argument, if you will, or like case for why, even if you don't have kids, this is why you want to do it, because at the end of the day, your bottom line, it's your workforce. To your point, that there are, women, well, maybe women's issues aren't important to you, but, workforce is important to you, and that's half your workforce. And if you're having to retrain and rehire, your bottom line is not that great.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that type of, like when you think about bipartisan, like I'm trying to kind of.
Yeah, I think the economic argument, it can be very helpful. It's really important to have that for the record. I don't know how I don't know how much people get really excited by the economic argument, but I do think it's the strongest argument. It's been true since the Heckman curve.
Yep.
It's been true since all of the Head Start studies proved that just small investments in lower income kids yielded huge results in their overall lifetime, whether it was higher earnings or less utilization of the safety net, both of which allow us to have more resources collectively. So there's a great economic argument that has been made.
Something like a child tax credit actually also
Child
has been
tax credit showed immediately greater reductions in poverty, and then that stopped too. So we give people something that the evidence proves works, and then we let it lapse. We let SNAP benefits lapse. We let the Affordable Care Act subsidies lapse. We let the child tax credit lapse. Again, back to a big, sort of meta-analysis, is that we don't have a strong enough movement, and we can't apply enough pressure to hold on to those wins.
Yeah.
And so it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or reverse. And the economic argument is good, but I think it has to be made over and over and over again. In other words, you have to sustain that as your primary message. And one thing I've been interested in as we think about 20 years from now, and the kids that are growing up now, say they were born during COVID, they're in kindergarten now, and now they're faced with an online world or an online education that would not necessarily, we might not necessarily prepare them for the career they're going to have. Many futurists say we won't know. Those children have no idea. We have no idea what jobs they'll have. And the bottom line is, all of these kids become people who work, hopefully, and that is how we generate tax revenue. Yeah. And we're here talking about tax revenue.
We are.
We're talking about tobacco tax revenue, but we're also talking about all of our collective income tax and sales tax.
General fund.
Other taxes that help pay for education and health care. So if we're reducing the number of children born because families are cautious and concerned.
The data has proven that over.
Then we don't invest in them. So then it's harder for them to be prepared for a future workplace that might be very complicated, very difficult. And we still assume we'll have as much revenue and as much ability to do as what we're doing today with fewer people doing something we can't train them for without basic needs being met. We're sort of setting ourselves up for a bit of a tough...
A reality check.
Yeah.
So you said something, we assume, like, who's the we? Because I'm a little bit of people, yes, we're trained social workers. I'm very practical, right? Like, there's like the data is the data. The population is the population. And so is it like, so how do we, as we're positioned, and it just also all boggles the mind, we were the, 7th largest economy, 6th, 7th, now we're the 4th largest economy. I'm like, what is happening? Why can't we, here in California, invest just a little bit more in babies? Because it's this constant education, yet I do think that people think we have this forever resource, and we just don't. Mm-hmm. Just because the cost of everything just goes up. That is like, even if our revenue goes up, so does housing, so does healthcare, a number of things. So how do we do proper forecasting for a community, for our youngest?
Well, there's just the birth rate, which has dropped year by year by year. But that's not the only way you can reinvigorate or revitalize a community or an economy. You can do that through immigration. You can do that through policy changes that allow parents to stay home longer with their young child. You can do that through a whole host of family-friendly policies that are future-oriented. So we're future-proofing kids. We're saying it's important for us to do something now because we're all dependent on each other. We all
Yeah.
need each other. We need young kids to have successful childhoods so they can be successful adults. We have to invest in them now so that they can do what they need to do later. And everything you're saying is so spot on. But the worrisome thing as we sit here is, as much as you and I see it and get it, we have not fully impacted our friends in the legislature, in Congress, and I don't mean that they don't know and care. I think there's just so much coming at people. We have been, our zone has been flooded. There is a lot of chaos and confusion, and it's really hard to stick with, say, a small policy that would have an incremental impact on children over time when what you're really dealing with is the end of a food supplement program. ICE raids. You can't, how do you, if you're a leader at the local level, manage all of that and then very methodically and carefully and patiently ensure that our education system is meeting the needs of kids 5 or 10 years from now? I have so much empathy for our friends in the legislature, for this administration to have honestly juggled as many priorities as they have. And it is a moment for First Fives to even think, how can we be creative? How can we think outside the box? How can we look at what they're trying to do, which may not on its face look like an early childhood policy, but it is. So if somebody's fighting hard for cheaper housing, that's an early childhood policy. If somebody's fighting hard for subsidies so people can buy used cars, that's an early childhood policy. I think we have to start looking out at beyond our own agenda at like what they're trying to do and say, let's call that an early childhood policy because it
Climate.
diaper banks, climate. Yes, those are all early childhood policies. And maybe then the economic argument could be even more compelling because we're saying we think every part of what the state's working on is an early childhood policy in some way.
And it is.
So let's calculate it.
Yeah, it's not just for them, especially you think about climate, and it is about the generation. If it's not about our babies, then who's it for?
Yeah.
Right, and so that's a really just fabulous argument because I don't think First Five has generally shown up in the climate space. The way that others have.
It's
I could be
starting
wrong,
to be true, though. There are some convenings happening, and I think that's an excellent area to focus some energy on because I think it's contributing to young couples, people saying, I don't know if should we have a child when it all feels so precarious?
Well, my children are teenagers, and they're wondering whether or not they're going to have children. Which they'll say they'll adopt, but like having their own children is another thing. But that is a real, because climate change is real for them.
It's existential.
It is. It's existential, and it's that is like, Mommy, you don't understand. But like, oh, okay, help me understand. But there is this deep fear for our young people, and again, they're not yet adults. They're teenagers, and they said this to me actually when they were even younger. And so, how do we show up in those spaces? Humbly, first, because we haven't been in that space, and kind of try to convince the masses that this is a 0 to 5, also a 0 to 5 issue. We have a child, we both of us have a child welfare background. We know like 30 to 40% of children in child welfare are 0 to 5, yet I haven't seen strategic action, kind of efforts. We have, mandated is supporting right now, a lot of it, and I'll just admit, I was one of them, like focused on the teenagers and the, the 12 and up. Behavioral health. So how do we show up in those spaces saying, and becoming the experts about 0 to 5, not experts about child welfare, not experts about climate, but how do we say, and the babies? And the babies.
Yeah, great. I think it would be great.
How do we show up? Is it like more informational? Is it PSAs? Is it, because we do have this opportunity through mass media to like, if the human can't be there are things that we can do.
Yeah, so young people are getting the vast majority of young people are getting the vast majority of their information online. They're not going, I gave the example of reading a newspaper. That would never, ever, ever happen again. In fact, what's happening is they're getting information online through apps that are algorithmically fed. And so we have also found ourselves in a situation where kids are living in ecosystems or echo chambers that are being, not only teed up, but prolonged by algorithms. And when you say, what if we could reach more people? What if we could connect these issues? My recommendation is think about how you could use technology altruistically for good to try to reach more people in California that might not realize how important the work you're doing is through the use of social media for good.
Yeah.
Because, there may be a way to cross over some of these information channels that are feeding them, in my opinion, information that's not always that useful or accurate, with something that might resonate, that would feel to them like, oh, I want to know more about that. Oh, I think that's important. I will actually stop and read or watch a short form video or do something that's connected to an issue bigger than myself. Because one of the positives we've seen with kids on social media is when they have an opportunity to connect to a movement, they want to. If it's climate, reproductive health, if it's immigration, when they see something happening that feels unjust or unfair, they very much want to gather online to learn more, to understand that better, and sometimes actually take action in real life. Go to a march or go to a demonstration, go to a community meeting, where they can get more information in real life. So I would recommend thinking about how to take some of your work online to new audiences that might not have
not
a
our
clue.
traditional audience.
No.
So because everyone who follows us has followed us for 20 years.
Yeah.
But the type of messaging you're suggesting is slightly different just from education. It's actual action oriented.
Yeah.
Right. So I love that idea of like, and my staff knows I don't even own a TikTok account. So I'm like, I trust you. You're young. You're of a generation. So I trust you and what you're doing in the research. I believe you. So that's a huge shift for the culture of who we are as First Five, though. Right. Moving from purely education to a little bit of like movement building is what I'm hearing. Like, how do we create and be part of that early childhood? Maybe create it like the full, comprehensive early childhood movement.
Yeah. You have so many great colleagues in the legislature and the administration and the departments. You have so many people that I think are such effective speakers that you could feature. Friends in the philanthropy community, friends in the academic community, pediatricians that have been really successful at talking to younger people. I mean, you could create a speakers series of people that are speaking directly to younger Californians about what's coming next, what they can do to get involved, and how young kids should really matter to them. It's like everything else.
Yeah, that's so innovative for us. Yet it's so obvious, right? So obvious because sometimes we get caught into, like, to your point, like, we've always done this way. We do it this way because we have done it for 10 years, 20 years, and so to begin to shift and like getting that like new energy and your new perspective and from the commissioners is really exciting perspective. What is your best advice for the audience? I'll say. About what they can do to get involved in this movement that we are hopefully beginning, or we've been part of. Reigniting. How about reigniting?
So taking all of these structures and systems and leaders out of it for a minute and just getting back to basics, right? You live in a community. You probably see young kids in your community walking to school or playing with their parents or having dinner in a restaurant or going to the library. I would just start slowing down and paying attention to the young people around you. How and tell yourself how important they are. Remind yourself that this is the future right here, walking past your front yard, or while you're sitting and reading the paper at a coffee shop and they're playing with their parent next to you. Be grateful. Be happy that there are young people in this state that are willing to raise babies and toddlers and preschoolers, and think deeply about what your tax dollars are doing to support them, and think deeply about how you want to protect their future by protecting those resources for them, and include it in all of the other thinking you do about the kind of just, fair, equitable society you want to live in, but maybe center your thinking more through the eyes of a child.
Yeah. So you were part of the commission when we established the North Star, right? So that we believe in a generation that all children should have safe, stable, nurturing relationships and environments that are necessary to address inequities and necessary for healthy development. A couple of years later, you stepped away and come back in. What does that mean to you now as you're coming back into this position?
Yeah, so it means the same thing. The North Star is always something you're striving for. It's hugely ambitious and aspirational. It's almost unachievable. But it focuses you, and it gives all of us some moral authority to take stronger action, to be louder, to do more. Because when you attach yourself to a goal, that you really believe in, you take more risks. You try, you push yourself and your friends and family harder to care about the thing you care about. I think what First Five California is and can do and should do more of is give us all that star to reach for, because we're all a little lost here in the dark. It's getting really dark. It's getting really hard.
Yeah.
So First Five can be that bright spot where we can reminded of how beautiful and important children are, what an incredible asset they are. Then we can kind of be reinvigorated to go back and do the hard work of getting them the future they deserve.
So I'm curious now that you've been a lot of different movements. So what are the similarities? What are the findings? What is the what can we learn from them?
So the other places where I feel like I've had a chance to learn and work are in the marriage equality movement, and also in the kids online safety movement.
Okay.
And in my mind, they're all the same.
Say more. Yeah.
Because in every single instance, the policy change that's necessary is protective. And it also sends a message to children that they're valuable and they're equal, and that they will be protected by their government. And what I believe about the marriage equality movement, the kids online safety movement, and the early childhood movement is that we're sending a message to the future. That this is a state, California is a state where we protect everyone. No one's better than somebody else. We're all equal. No one's better than. So when laws are taken down that say one group's better than another group, we're making progress. When we have investments in young children because we know that they'll benefit for the rest of their lives, we're making them more equal. When we know that kids are online and they're less safe online than they are in real life, we have to protect them online also. Because you can't be cyberbullied but not bullied.
Right.
You can't be trafficked online but not in real life. We have allowed everything that we protect kids from in real life to happen online.
Oh my gosh.
So what I care about in these three places is always bringing the sensible approach to protecting children so that they can thrive. And in every one of those efforts, that was the reason everybody worked on them.
Yeah.
And continue to work. That's why you work on it.
It is to protect little Jackies and little Chris's.
Yeah.
And
so we have to do something so that the Kris is growing up in Bakersfield and the Jackie's growing up in Stockton don't have to worry about being treated unfairly because of the color of their skin or their sexual orientation, that instead they would be valued or even more so cherished as an asset in their community.
And in other countries they do. They focus on children. They have whole, kind of pledges to do this for children, and just trying to kind of figure out, I'm going to say that what's wrong with this, like we haven't gotten there.
No.
Not in California, not in America. And you think about like what is preventing from that? What is preventing us from that? Mm-hmm. What is preventing us from that?
Fear. The fear of the unknown, fear of what we don't understand. And that's why I'm so glad we're having this conversation, because I think the more people know you and know me, the more they can say, all right, it's okay if we're all included. It's okay if we all have a voice in this. It's better than if we leave people out.
Yeah. So you talk about this kind of trifold, these three movements that you've been part of, right? The marriage equality, the early childhood, and the online, protecting children movement. Like part of me is like sometimes I fangirl. You're like, I'm so proud that she's doing this. I know Kris Perry. Well, there's that clip of her on the Supreme Court, like in that movie. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, there's like this new movement that you are, dare I say, like partly leading, if not leading, right, for children and screens. Talk to us about that, because it is this new horizon that is, I don't, like somebody says, AI, you mentioned AI, I'm like deer in the headlights, like what does that even mean, kind of for our kids. So they're growing up in a world where they have to adapt to evolving technology and then yet at the same time, what you had shared is that they're not protected. It is an open field with no regulations, that's international, has zero borders, Commissioner Perry. So tell us about like what you're doing, and is it just beginning to educate? What is, and you had mentioned when we spoke earlier that California's doing such a great job this year. So talk to us a little bit about that, and like give us those nuggets of hope, yet also, okay, this is the roadmap and what we should be considering.
Yeah, I'm happy to. Well, let me back up. and then go forward. So we both remember, right, when smartphones and social media were fully deployed a little over 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And and then the pandemic happened and kids went home and were online for many, many years. And now here we are in 2025. And what we have seen happen is a full-scale experiment on our kids for over a decade to see whether they can cope with a device in their pocket that was designed to grab their attention constantly and get an education and have friends and not feel lonely. And the verdict's in, it didn't work. They aren't doing well with this device and all of its products because they weren't designed for kids. They aren't child-centered, and more importantly, we've shown over and over again there are tremendous harms. Everything from their physical health being compromised to their sleep health to their emotional and mental health. And one of the things that I'm really excited to see is there's amazing leadership in California. In part because we are the home to Silicon Valley. We are the home to these companies. They are headquartered in our state. And at the same time, they're impacting children all around the world with products that were really designed to keep adults' attention, but they know it's also keeping children's attention. In California, there has been some incredible legislation passed. One is an age-appropriate design code bill that would essentially stop some of that algorithmic abuse that children are subjected to when they can't turn it off. They can't stop scrolling. They can't make the content be what they want it to be. It's what the company wants it to be. That's been incredibly landmark legislation. It happens to be in the courts right now, but hopefully that will go forward. There's also just some smaller stuff that's really interesting where kids can now delete information from the internet, from their platforms that they weren't allowed to delete before. So imagine the millions of bytes of data that are collected about you when you're only 8 or 9 years old that are forever kept and linked
as you're,
to you
like, on
for the rest
the
of your
phone.
life. And in California now there's a right to delete for children,
Really?
which is really powerful stuff. It's like, hey, when you're in these sensitive developmental periods, you are going to say and do things online, post photos of yourself that you might later realize were really not what you wanted to
not
track
who
you
are,
forever.
yeah.
And then the last thing I'll say about some of the interesting work that's going on in California are school phone bans to try to prevent children from being distracted during the school day. And I know that's really complicated.
No.
But again, it's an attempt to like protect children from being connected to a device more. And we know with teenagers, they're online more than 8 hours a day outside of the school day.
They are.
And we know that they're checking their phones more than 300 times per day.
You said more than 300 times a day?
More than 300 times per day. So we have a really serious child development struggle here that goes beyond early childhood. It's all children.
Yeah.
But it starts in early childhood. More and more young children have their own device. They're on more than 2 or 3 hours a day. There is no evidence to show they should be on at all under the age of 5. And more I'm hearing that centers and child care providers are using screens, so they're having exposure at school, they're having exposure at home. So the good news is lawmakers, governors, attorneys general are stepping up and starting to push back on industry to say these products aren't safe when we don't want them. And with the advent of AI and generative AI, it's an emergency. They have to do it now. In addition to that, federal government also concerned about online safety, AI chatbots and companions. They're introducing bills. But I'll come back to both a hopeful and worrisome point, which is we've had a hard time protecting children in this country for a very long time. And now it's getting more dangerous because their online lives and their digital lives, their real lives are conflated. They're overlapping. And we haven't done everything we needed to do for them in real life. And now here comes all the risk in digital life. So I think more and more we have to talk about these things all at the same time because that's what's happening in the real world. We adults need to start recognizing that that's the life they're living now, and we have to help them have safety in both places.
So let me ask you this, but some adults is like, I do it all the time, so what's good for me is good for you. So how do you break through that adult, like, well, I'm fine. So
the adults aren't fine.
I know.
Adults are not fine. Adults are addicted to their phones.
Honest.
Adults are addicted to their phones, and they're participating in modeling, and we know how important modeling is in early childhood. The very thing that we hope children don't do, which is look at their device, pick up their device, spend more time on their device than they are in real life. We know that the human brain is wired for human connection. That has been proven over and over again. When we disrupt that connection by picking up a device, we're disrupting the child's optimal development. The reason online safety is so key is that we want it to not interfere with those critical attachments and connections that will help shape the child's future for the better. We talk about a future we don't know what job they're going to have. More and more you read that kids who have the ability to interact in real life, in real time, are the ones who will succeed. So at Children's Screens, we study the impacts of social media, digital media on children birth to 25, because that's when the brain really stops developing. And we want to know the full breadth and depth of the impact of digital media on child development, so we can help people like you and others that are working on early childhood and other parts of child development, so you know that this is also urgent and that you can incorporate this into digital literacy, media literacy, parent education materials that you develop, so that parents have that built into their tool belt. So they know that they have to start as early as 2 or 3 years old, helping their child understand why they're so attracted to these devices, why they have to stop using them, what's safe, what's not safe. It's all communication.
I mean, I know you're much younger than me, but we're talking about a generation of parents who are digital natives. They have never grown up in a space where there is not the internet, there weren't devices. I remember as a kid, we ran out, I don't know where we were, like maybe it was in Napa, like we played in the streets until we were called home. Right?
Oh yeah,
like
well, I was told not to come home until it got dark. That's how long ago,
Until it got
Do not come back.
Do not come back. You leave, do your homework's done, go. And now it's like, okay, this idea of the world is unsafe, partly because of COVID, right? Like we said, there's germs, whatever. And so I find it just, and this is just a personal narrative of like, it's hard to get people, what kids say, the IRL. And there's high, anxiety and a number of things. So how do we, as we're speaking to the parents, who are digital natives, what do we do? Is like, we're not trying to make them feel bad about their, what they've grown up in.
No, guilt and shame are not helpful in this moment. But that tends to be the messaging around it is, put it down, do better. But the reality is everybody has picked up a device and has gotten attached to it. Everybody has. So I have a lot of empathy for parents right now. Yeah. Not only are they stressed about money, stressed about parenting, they also know that their digital lives are not as healthy as they want them to be. They know that. So I think there are some really simple messages about the importance of eye contact, about the importance of engaging with your children, whether it's through digital media or real media, like reading books or watching a show together. The more you can be shoulder to shoulder with your child and your eyes on them, every extra minute of that you give them is worth 10 times as much effort as it was. So I say we send them messages that say even incremental shifts, a few extra minutes a day of you looking at them and not at your device will pay off. Creating screen-free zones, creating rules about when you will or will not be on your phone is all a way of making rules for yourself and your family that will help everybody be healthier later on.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for everything that you are doing, everything that you've done, and it's just the beginning. I'm just so grateful. We're all so grateful for our collective work together and kind of being part of this early childhood movement.
Thank you.
Thank you for driving all the way down. And any last words for our audience?
No. Well, I want to say, at Children's Screens, we have all free open access resources for families with children birth to 5. They can pull off guides or one-pagers, or they can listen to podcasts or watch webinars and listen directly to experts who have studied these impacts that I touched on here. If they want to learn more, they can go and pull up all kinds of information at childrenscreens.org.
Yeah, childrenscreens.org. Thank you so much.